Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Jed, thanks so much for joining us today, man.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Absolutely. Where are you calling in from? Where's home base for you?
So headquarters for Richard Group is downtown Chicago.
Nice. Fellow Midwesterner. I got to make it up to Chicago sometime soon. I'm in St. Louis. When I do, I'll definitely reach out. It'd be great to meet up in person.
Do it before the snow hits, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Jed. So your formal introduction: Jed Richard, separated from the Army as an Airborne and Ranger-qualified Captain. Jed served the entirety of his military career with the 173rd Airborne Brigade from Vicenza, Italy, where he served 3 tours to Afghanistan in Operation Enduring Freedom. In his service, Jed earned several awards to include the Bronze Star, Army Achievement Award, Navy Service Medal, and the Combat Infantryman's Badge. Today, Jed is the CEO and president of Richard Group, a full-service general contracting and construction management firm that provides innovative and sustainable solutions for public and private sector clients across the United States. Richard Group has successfully delivered complex and challenging projects in various verticals such as DoD, energy, technology, clean water, and healthcare. Jed is also an active member of YPO and the Lions Pride. Last but certainly not least, Jed is a husband to Meredith Richard and a father and hockey coach of 3 boys, Connor, Graham, and Eamon. First and foremost, congratulations on a big family. That's awesome, man. Love to hear that.
Hearing the family introduction is the best part of this whole thing.
Agree. That's why I try to make a point of having it there. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad you agree. So
Absolutely.
as we all know, we like to kick off with childhood. Tell us about where you grew up and what childhood was like and what led you to your service.
Yeah, and then talking to veterans and active service members that will transition, I'll kind of tie it into that. But I grew up a kid in a pretty blue collar family. My father was one of 5 brothers. My grandfather owned a construction company in Cheshire, Connecticut, so small farm town type community, about 20 miles outside of New Haven, Connecticut. And so my grandfather owned an excavation company. My dad owned one. My uncles, all 3 of them, the other ones, they all owned their separate dirt companies, excavation companies, utility companies, masonry and stone companies. So I grew up in a fairly entrepreneurial family really early. I just remember at 5, 6 years old, my track was always athletics. So I was a hockey and baseball player. I'll tell that story in a little bit, but I played at a fairly high level up and through college. And so I was the first graduate of a 4-year university in a massive family on my dad's side. My mom's side, family of educators, Italian immigrant side, they were well educated. But on my dad's side, it was all about kind of grit, working hard, working through things. And, in the summertime, when I wasn't playing hockey and baseball, I'd go join my father's crews out in the field. So laying down anything from bricks to stone to working with landscape crews and digging holes and spreading mulch. I was on asphalt rollers as a kid. I was pulling and doing form work for light concrete foundations. And I always kind of found it that I really didn't enjoy working with my hands as much as the strategy of things. So quickly, I don't know what it was, but about 7 years old, I'd always wear around this Harvard University sweatshirt saying that I was going to be an architectural engineer. Because the one thing that all of my family didn't do, they did everything from the ground below. And I think I was fixated on what buildings did for people, right? I was always interested in what the general contractor did. So I wasn't playing cowboys and Indians out in the field. I was very athletic from a really young age. Did go through several bouts of illness. I was a really sickly kid. I had pneumonia 7 times. I missed all of 5th grade, virtually except for like a month, really ill then. And I just knew through the transition of my youth, I was a a budding two-sport Division I athlete. I went to Cheshire High School. Famous Brian Leach, that was captain of the New York Rangers, grew up in Cheshire. My grandparents owned the twin hockey rinks in town because my uncle Eric was also a really special hockey player, played in the pros for a few years, and also played with Brian Leach. So I knew that was my path. Education-wise, went to high school in Cheshire High School for 3 years, transferred over to Taft and repeated my junior year, knowing that college athletics was going to be really important to me and that I, kind of wanted to try the two-sport Division I athletics route. Unlike some of my other classmates, I ended up going to West Point, but I wasn't, playing Army as a kid. I wasn't digging in with fake weapons. I never shot anything before I went to West Point in my first year, bow and arrow or weapon or whatnot. And I guess the defining moments leading into, and maybe getting out of my childhood and moving forward into going to West Point, I just knew at that point in my life that I needed structure. I wanted to. I think I was really self-aware. One of those things that we want to talk to veterans about. I was really self-aware at a young age what my strengths and weaknesses were. I knew what I needed to work on. And I also knew that I needed a path of structure at a place like West Point that was fairly regimented, that would force me into good wellness habits. I think it really started there. I don't think I had good wellness habits before that. And that's just eating the right foods, getting up at a certain time, not necessarily grounding like I want to start getting into now and taking your shoes off and walking in the grass, but watching the sunset, watching the sun come up, watching the sun go down, um, eating healthy meals like that. I knew I needed that to have healthy mind and body
Hmm.
going into going into adulthood, essentially. So that led me to West Point. I guess the reasons for going to West Point, besides the athletics, because it was pre 9/11, which was it's a really interesting story. But I was probably closest to my grandfather on my mom's side from a really early age. And my grandfather served in World War II. He was an E6 signal enlisted guy, and he worked for AT&T and the line gang after getting out of service. And he always just talked about the stories, the camaraderie of his unit and of his people, and then going on the boats in the English Channel. And he would talk about all these later in his military career, and he only served the 4 years wartime. But he would talk about these like West Point colonels, like he was a driver for one of them. He'd talk about the prestige of the position and the prestige of the leadership. And I was just really bought into what leadership and intentionality was to him. And, that generation that obviously is almost, I think there's like 2% of that generation left at this point, but they're really just fascinating to talk to. No technology. It was like sitting in a chair underneath the tree in my backyard and really just talking about what wartime was like and what leadership meant to folks and what values meant. And those guys were afraid every day for their lives. So just to know that there were these West Point leaders that they put on a pedestal and knew they gave it their all, and just really how he talked about them. I had so much respect for my grandfather's enlisted men that I was like, you know what? If I had a chance to go play a couple of Division I athletics and hockey and baseball and get a world-class education that is for free, I think that's my path. So that's really me kind of growing up in a nutshell, um, from Cheshire to New York.
Yeah, that's a really just amazing general upbringing and picture that you just painted for me and all of our listeners. I thought something was, I mean, I thought a handful of things were interesting. One is the combination of kind of childhood sports plus work in construction industry. I mean, I don't think you could set yourself up any better for military than that combination of things. So that was really interesting to hear.
I think that's a great point. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
we'll talk about it later on, but I find the structure of the military, and for veterans that do want to look to get into the architectural engineering and
Mhm.
construction industry, the hierarchy of how an Army or Navy platoon or a unit works, it's very similar in the hierarchy, especially when you're a general contractor building a building. So to have that as a kid was
So,
all walks of life coming in, people working
mhm.
on machines, people estimating projects, working in the office. You have to learn to be really relatable and authentic, be authentic to everybody around you. So
Spot
Absolutely.
on. Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
then the second thing that came to mind was, I was going to ask you, but then you answered my question before I even had to ask it was, if your grandfather spoke to you about his service. And I think that's amazing that you're able to, pull stories or just hear stories, because typically, at least from my experience, it's really hard to hear, from that generation stories about their service. So, love hearing that you were able to kind of, absorb that from him. That's really amazing.
I think they were just such a
Moving for,
humble, they
hmm,
were just such a humble group of folks. They were just lucky to
yeah,
survive and come back from the war. And they were so entrenched in the organizations that they served after being in the Army, Navy, Marines. They felt the culture of those companies. And I even heard that talking when he was saying he was in the line gang going through Southern New England Telephone, which is a subsidiary of AT&T, to working in the home office in New York City. Just the pride he had working through with that company was really unique.
yeah. It's so inspiring and so amazing. And just doubling down on what I said before, really happy to hear that you were able to absorb those stories from him, because that's just unfortunately not usual or the typical circumstance. So, moving forward, I know we started getting into West Point, and I'll say I'm sorry for not adding that in the introduction. I missed that. So, West Point graduate. But before we get through that process, I know it's very rigorous. I mean, by any standard, right? Even for an adult, that would be a rigorous process. Not to mention for an 18-year old. Talk to us about the application, how you got accepted, and what that looks like.
Yeah, so I went through the application process out of Taft, which was a prep school in Connecticut, 1999. And for anybody, any adolescents that are looking to get into service, serve their country, whether it's through service academies or through ROTC or any of those things, West Point's pretty rigorous. You do have to go through congressional nominations. So, but before that, you have to pass a series of tests, and it's kind of like really uniquely the way I have my company set up. But we do care about wellness and health metrics as much as we do about the technical capacity of a person at Richard Group and organization. But back then it was making sure you had the right grades. 78% of West Point graduates, class of 1,100 people that start off as plebes at West Point, over 70% are captains of their sports teams or of their clubs or of debate teams, right? There's definitely this outside of academia. Um, they want people to be extremely well rounded, which leads into officership and be able to command and control the elements that you work with. So, it was interesting. I went to a gym at Taft, and I had one of our, I think it was one of my coaches, maybe my hockey coach. He had to watch me go through, I think it was like 6 different tests. I mean, one of them back in the day was like throwing a basketball from your knees as far as you can, which is like my best event because I was a pitcher in baseball. So I remember taking the basketball, and you're supposed to go at least 50 or 60 feet. And I hit the back wall on the other side of the gym, which was great. And it's like, I think standing long jump, I think there was a little bit of a shuttle run and maybe pull ups and push ups. But we went through that. And once you pass that, I think the last 10 to 15% of the applicants actually get to sit down with a senator or congressperson. And those people are surrounded by panel judges, and you basically talk about your experiences. I think they're looking for an empathetic leader that's got a lot of grit and somebody that they feel that could serve the country. It was obviously before wartime. The bombing of the U.S. Cole, I think, might have happened right around me applying to West Point and getting into West Point 1999 timeframe. So that was the application process for getting into West Point. I got in early. I remember getting the letter over at my friend's house. I was in like Trumbull, Connecticut, my buddy John's house, and they brought I think that somebody put me on the phone with one of my parents and said, "Hey, we just got this letter. You want to open it?" And we opened it, and I was in, and it was like an immediate thing that I knew I was going to do.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you what it was like to open that acceptance letter, but I think you kind of just answered that question right now, where you remember the circumstance when you got it and opened it. That's amazing, man.
I don't think that. I hope they teach it more in school, and I hope parents are better about it. But there's this kind of cognition that being humble, that you can't celebrate with others, and you're supposed to be so humble that people shouldn't know about things. And I just I've learned not to believe in that. I believe that you should share in all of those celebrations with people that you love and your really good friends and your trusted tribe network. And, I do remember that. And I remember being like, all right, I got to put that away. Now there's a lot of work to do to get to the next step. So I think my life's always been this path of thinking about intentionally how to keep on building my life and a lot of mind, body, soul control of how I would get there. But I think every young kid should learn how to celebrate world class wise, because once they get into the real world, especially what we did in the Army and transitioning veterans, going through that transition process and getting your first job or your second job or going and getting your master's or your MBA, or even getting your first promotion when you start working for a company. Those are like really highly celebratory moments that you get a lot of in the Army. There's so many different
Mhm.
milestones that you're continually going up this echelon ladder, which you don't necessarily have unless you're really, really good at what you do in the private sector, which I'm sure we'll kind of double back on after.
Yeah, well said. Let's definitely put a pin on that. That's something we should absolutely hash out when we get to that segment of the show. But where we're at right now, walk us through what it was like starting West Point and going through your degree there.
Oh man, I like my plebe year so much I did it twice, but that's because I got sick and I did a red shirt. So I went to West Point, um, eh, do something called Beast Barracks. So that's basically boot camp for cadets. And I remember being about a month and a half into my cadet experience by Camp Buckner, which is this little training area, and we were doing something called the walk back, or one of the hikes walks back to West Point. And my cadre started looking at me. So the upperclassmen, they're looking at me. This guy was like 195 pounds, pretty fit, have a lot of muscle. And by the end of like 2 weeks before we were about to head home, I think I was like 178 pounds. And I started going for this walk, and I'm like, I can't even move my feet one in front of the other. Well, anyways, so happens that I was pretty sick, went to the hospital for the next 11 days, had, I think, like 10 liters of IVs, and essentially went down to 165 pounds. Turns out I had mononucleosis, right? You have
Mhm.
all these 18, 19-year-old kids sleeping in tents and out in the yard, we're drinking canteens from each other and just sharing everything with each other, learning how to be a soldier. And so I played my first Division I hockey game out in Minnesota. I remember flying. It was at Bemidji. I was like barely hanging on. I was about 168 pounds. So I'd lost, about 30 pounds from in a 2, 3 month period, and got to the end of that first semester. As you know, and I'm sure people have heard, like if you're going to service academy, it's fairly rigorous. Um, they are hard on first year students, not only the teachers, but definitely the upperclassmen. Um, and I never really experienced any hardcore hazing or anything like that you hear from service academies, especially some of the older folks when it was more male dominated before females were allowed at service academies. I didn't necessarily experience that, but just everything felt like a test, and you needed your energy and you needed your health. So I got done with that first game and I went back to somebody who leads a company at West Point. There's 32 different cadet companies at West Point with about 130 students at each of those. I went to the captain, that was an active duty military officer that's in charge of that 130 cadets. And I was an A1 axeman at the time, and I think it was this guy, Captain McGugan, his name was. I'm like, yeah, sir, I need to go home and I need to start this process over because I'm failing miserably at all aspects of my life. And that's what I did. So I actually went home. I think it was like December 12th or 13th, whatever the day of the Army Navy game was. I got a medical red shirt leave of exemption. I went home for 8 months and I started the process all over again, as a plebe, as an unrecognized plebe. So something in West Point that they have called recognition is where you can't talk outside your room and you can't speak to upperclassmen unless people are talking to you. There's all these rules that go along with not being recognized in terms of how the Corps of Cadets looks at you. So I went through that process twice, which was kind of a pain. But taught me some life lessons of how to treat people the right way and how to treat subordinates the right way. And, you know, knowing if you're on the low side of the totem pole, that there's others that are going to be in that same predicament as you. So just having that mindset of, being strict, being respected, but there's a healthy way of doing that. So, and as far as West Point, I majored. It was actually awesome. I because it kind of went along with what I wanted to do after I got out of the Army. But I was in the first management class of West Point, so they didn't want business people at West Point that would leave the Army early, because we're trying to build commission leaders of character that serve a full 20 years or 30 years in service. The the school at the time, I don't believe West Point wanted to have a business school where people would then think that they'd want to go make a lot more money outside of the Army and leave it behind. But so they called this thing Systems and Leadership and Management, SLAM management. So it's pretty much third business classes, third psychology, and third marketing. So it's really well rounded. I did that as a major. I started it as a double major in Russian at the Ujasno. What a nightmare. So not good trying to play two Division I sports, double majoring. And then I was a field of study in systems engineering. A really nice component of the service academies is that besides from having a major, you need to have a hard science engineering background. So having that in systems engineering and noting, and I thought that was important to my development. I wasn't really interested in a hard electrical or mechanical or aeronautical science degree at the time. So graduated from that management class, the first class of graduates in 2004, and had that systems engineering background. And I'd chosen before September 11th. I guess we haven't really talked that, but our class in 2004 was the first class. So at West Point and any other service academy, you could actually go your freshman or sophomore year. So your plebe year, your yuck year, you could go there and leave the academy up to the point of stepping into the classroom your junior year, free of charge. September 11th happens. As we go back into our sophomore year, it really changed everything. I went from a cadet that really cared about sports, getting through my 5 years of service, didn't even think about wartime. People were like doing fun stuff in Germany and all over, doing these training camps all over the world. It was really just a lot of nation partnering with a lot of our allies. And September 11th happened, which was obviously a unique experience. It went from a place where there was tons of tourism and visitors and people coming to West Point to be, at least those first 6 months, with tanks, with units at West Point completely locked down 35 miles north of ground zero, it was really just a perilous time at the academy. I think there were 15 to 20 of my classmates and peers that lost some family member in one of the towers, or even tied to, most of them were in the Pentagon, right? Active duty colonels and generals of children that were at the school. And there's this really neat tradition at West Point called a TAPS vigil. So everybody at midnight, if somebody passes away that's a cadet, the whole 4,000, probably 4,500 cadets at this point, go out onto the plain, which is one of the nicest pieces of grass in the United States. Besides, I think it's the second most valuable besides the White House lawn. And that's where we do all of our parades. And a TAPS vigil, you go out there in silence and you stay there at attention, just kind of thinking and praying out into space. So to do that, that was the first time I think we did it for non cadets. We did it for all the parents and families of people that were lost. So
Wow.
that really changed my perspective on things. I actually decided after September 11th, sports weren't really doing it for me anymore. It felt like a job. Before sports, I think I wanted to be an air defense artillery officer. Nothing against it, but it was just really a posh kind of job, not really hard, not extremely gritty. Although there's some fantastic officers that have served in that for years. And then after September 11th, I'm like, I want to be an airborne ranger. I want to be in the infantry, and I want to do the most I can for the country. Obviously being a kid from Connecticut and having family members in New York City and seeing what we just went through. So it was just a huge emotional transition. I think I gained a lot of emotional intelligence. I definitely wasn't the most mature kid my freshman year of
Mm.
college. Some kids, actually a ton of mature kids that ended up going to West Point, and they got it laser focused right away. And my mind wasn't there. But I would say after that was a huge turning point for me, and really brought reality to what we were going to be doing. I mean, I remember sitting there in my room my sophomore year being like, right after September 11th, we're just starting school again. And we're like, man, are they going to pull us out of school early to go fight? Is this World War III? I mean, the things that were going through our heads at all levels was just astonishing. And so fast forward that 3-4 years, and I decide to be an infantry officer, and I go start my training in officer school, infantry officer school down at Fort Benning, Georgia.
So before moving on to active duty, one is I'm sure that's, thank you for sharing that. That's a powerful moment and circumstance to be in West Point. Did anyone there, meaning like your professors, whoever, is in charge of you at that point, for lack of, better term there, did they say anything in particular about the moment and about what was happening moving forward for you and your
Yeah,
class?
yeah. I mean, a couple of things struck for me. Like one of the planes we saw burning down the Hudson going
Wow.
before going into class. We actually saw it, and I went into military art history my sophomore year. I took it as a sophomore to senior class. And usually there's uniform officers. About 80% of the teachers at West Point are uniform officers. I believe that's probably the same ratio now. The rest are civilians. And I remember Professor Clifford, which was just this amazing historian that ran my military art history. Every class at West Point also has 2 TV monitors in the corner.
Mhm.
So as you're walking into the class, the 10-minute transition between classes, one of the towers is already hit. And right before class starts, the other tower hits. The other plane hits the tower. And he turned off the TV. He's like, team, we're going to have to keep on moving through this. And he had tears in his eyes. And he's like, this is going to change your life forever. So that was Professor Clifford. And then there was other guys. I had like Mayor Schmidt in Russian class. I think one of the guys that made me think about being like a Russian foreign area officer. He was a special forces officer. I think you just had a lot of teachers that were mad. There were a lot of guys that served for 15, 20 years that were teachers that had an experience being in battle. You hear all these stories from their perspective of Vietnam vets or guys that have been through Grenada. People have done the Desert Storm folks, and these guys missed all that. And I think there was a sense of anger and purpose of I'm leaving my special forces guys or Rangers or whatever unit you served in, feeling like here I am in a posh school environment. And I should really be out there fighting the fight. And then there was all sorts of vignettes of all these captains and colonels. And I think my classmates, we just took it that much more seriously. We
Mhm.
had our moments of fun, but I mean, everybody for those 3 years leading up to graduation knew what we were going to do after. I mean, the amount of news of hearing an upperclassman that was a lieutenant that passed away as a platoon leader, or, troop commander, or whatever they were doing, and whatever an armor unit or an air artillery unit. And it started with Iraq, and then it became Afghanistan, and it was there was an intensity to it that I'm appreciative going through it. I think it did make us hyper alert and hyper vigilant, and I think there's something special about our class. In particular, we've lost a ton of classmates. I think 14 tied to combat related deaths. Pretty early in the war, usually it was mainly tied to combat, but we've lost a lot to suicides and losing people to the next fight in their lives. So it's people did carry a lot of weight with them for those years, and it's something we all recognize, and we're trying to help our classmates get to a position where they can be successful outside of the military.
Yeah, it's certainly a defining moment, defining sense of purpose, an elevated sense of purpose. It's, yeah, very very powerful as you relate in your story. So finishing with West Point. Um, actually two questions. One is on the overall experience of West Point. I understand that typically there's lots of I'll call it unique opportunities. I think in the summers in particular. Did you have anything that comes to mind in particular for your summers?
Yeah, I lucked out. Actually, I had some friends. So some of these active duty officers and non-commissioned officers that, we become friends with, especially wartime stuff. But I remember going into my junior year. Now, your summers going into your junior and then going into your senior year really divided into halves. Say basically do two specialized types of things going into each of those. One where you learn about the Army, one you learn about your unit, right? One you actually serve with the unit itself. But I remember uh, my non-commissioned officer for 4 years. I didn't let you know that, but I was an A3. So I was an Anaconda for 4 years. I actually did my second plebe year, and they were like, "Oh, you're doing well there. We see this kid needing that structure." So I decided, and they decided to keep me in the same company of cadets. So I became friends with the leader, commissioned, non-commissioned officers there. I remember one in particular, he came up to me. He's like, "Jed, listen, nobody wants to do this position during the summer. And your classmates are going to probably hate you. You have to hold them accountable. Nobody wants to hold their own classmates accountable." And I'm like, "Well, what's the position?" They're like, "I want you to be Cadet Sergeant Major of Airborne or Air Assault School at West Point." So at West Point, you could go, and one of those things that you could do, you go to airborne school mainly, or air assault schools. I think very select few maybe did Pathfinder school. I think some really great swimmers did scuba school that were able to do it. And he said that, and I was like right away already thinking my negotiation. I was like, "Sergeant, if I'm going to that, you got to send me when I do my CTLT, which is Cadet Leadership Training. I want to go to Hawaii." He's like, let me go back. Let me see. He came back like 20 minutes later. He's like, "You're Sergeant Major of Air Assault School." And he's like, "Then you're going to be able to spend the second half of the summer in Hawaii with the Wolfhounds 227 infantry," which I was like so enamored by. There's such history behind them. And it was Hawaii, and I'd never been off the mainland. So I bartered for my junior year. And then what I do going into my senior year, I can't even remember what I did. Oh, that was going into my senior year. The summer before that, I actually went to airborne school at Fort Benning, Georgia. So that's what I did, which was, I hated every minute of it. I'm so afraid of heights. And it's kind of funny for a guy that's an airborne qualified ranger. The only reason I did it is because I knew that a ranger had to be qualified in jumping out of planes. And I knew the only thing that I needed to do to get that tab that I was scared of was jumping out of airplanes at a height of 1,000 to 1,250 feet. So I grinned and bared that. And I actually was in an airborne unit the whole entire active duty time that I participated in. I'm sure we'll talk about. So that's everybody has these really awesome, unique experiences. I also have two brother-in-laws that went to West Point with me as well. So my really close friend from that company, A3, married my wife's older sister, and then my wife's oldest brother is also a graduate. So they had their own experiences. One went to a French school over the summer and did French participation with them and live with them throughout the summer. So everybody has their own unique experiences. I think the school and generally the active Army does a really nice job trying to integrate and know that they need officers, that whether they're ROTC or if they're commissioned officers out of the service academies, people that are very relatable to the enlisted folks that they're going to be surrounded by. And I think it started at a really young age, making sure. I think also September 11th and what we went through, it was just like there was a sense of purpose that we had to come together, whether we didn't like each other or not. This isn't, we're not sitting, not getting deployed on base worrying who does the most push-ups and sit-ups, although physical prowess was definitely important. It was about like who's going to be trained to fight with me on the right and left. And so I think those summers were a really eye-opening experience for me. And it definitely made me choose the infantry. And knowing that I wanted to be a ranger, going to an airborne unit is what I chose as well. And I think the Wolfhounds, while they're not an infantry unit, they're a light unit. So they're not sitting in Bradley fighting vehicles. They're dismounted soldiers that were deployed, and they've done so many fascinating things. And that really helped me look and choose what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an amazing program, and that's exactly why I was asking, because I always hear awesome stories from those summer opportunities. So great to hear yours. That's probably the best military barter I've ever heard, in my opinion. So good on you for getting that. All right, so graduating West Point, what happens next?
Yeah, so I graduated West Point, and the funny story of it is I was supposed to go to a mechanized unit originally at Fort Carson, Colorado. And this couple approached me that was going to get married and said, "Hey, I think I'm going to be pregnant here pretty soon as a graduating cadet, knowing that they're going to be a lieutenant." And they're like, "We kind of want to be together on the same at the same location." And this one person had Vicenza, Italy. This other person had Fort Hood, Texas, and I had Colorado. And so we made a three-way trade to where I ended up getting uh, Vicenza, Italy. So I posted at post night. I got Fort Carson, Colorado, which was really exciting because my buddy that we ended up marrying sisters, he was stationed there originally, and the plan was to go live with him. But to have that sense of purpose, hearing about the 173rd Airborne Brigade out of Vicenza, Italy. So it's a parcel of land in Italy, borrowed from Caserma Ederle, which is an Italian base in their army up in the Dolomites, just at the base of the Dolomites in Italy. And it's such a storied unit, and it's really the only U.S. airborne unit in Europe.
Mhm.
So that's the unit that you go and launch if there's anything that happens in the MENA region, right? Northern Africa and European region. Um, they were the first to fight in all of those locations. So chose infantry, went to Ranger School right after West Point. Did the winter. I think I went there like January 6th. I remember being like 185 pounds, and I took 2 weeks off before, and I think I went up to like 206 just to stock myself up, knowing how much weight you lose at Ranger School.
Yeah.
And I definitely wasn't the best ranger in the world. I think I was very strong at what I did. I think I was a sleepy ranger, but I learned so much from that school about what my physical capacity was. I definitely wasn't even close to the peak of what, I think I became after that. But it's interesting. I did make it straight through whatever that's 59 or 60 days. So I was one of the third of the class that was able to not have to
Mhm.
repeat a phase of Ranger School. So there's small tactics at Fort Benning, Georgia, that happens. Then in Dahlonega, Georgia, up in the Georgia mountains, you learn winter phase and rappelling phase. And then you get flown in and you jump into northern Florida into the Destin area. And that's like unit tactics and fighting in a platoon size element. So I made it straight through that. And, I think I lost like 35 or 40 pounds at Ranger School. It was god awful at night. I really tested my mental fortitude. A lot of tough athletes that I was friends with. I remember us just standing there. And at Ranger School, it's not, I wouldn't say it's incredibly physically demanding. It's more mentally demanding of what
Mhm.
could be. So you get done with walking 10 miles and simulating a fight, and it'd be done at like 9 o'clock at night, and you think you're gonna get some food and go to sleep out in the middle of 35 degrees in Dahlonega, Georgia, up in the mountains. And next thing you know, you're standing up in a formation for the next 3 hours and you can't put a jacket on. And then, the ranger instructors, which we call RIs, would go set a fire, that you'd watch the fire for 2 hours as you're like freezing to death. And I just, there were so many moments those first like 30, 40 days. I'm like, I've done all this athletic stuff. I just graduated West Point. I don't have anything to prove to anybody. I am absolutely quitting. I think the quit mindset, or the quit, it's going to happen maybe 15 times, 15 different nights at the beginning there. And then I think you just build this mental hardiness. And what always stood in the back of my mind was, number one, if I don't graduate Ranger School, I'm not going to Italy. And that's just not going to happen. That was the
Mhm.
prize, to be able to go. And they had already fought. The unit that I was going to was the platoon that I actually commanded, my first platoon in combat. They had just gotten back from Iraq. They were the first unit to jump into a combat zone since Vietnam.
Mhm.
So that unit that I served with, there's just such a storied history. I'm like, if I die out here, I'm gonna leave my body out here, but I'm leaving it all out on the field. And it's a mindset that
Yeah.
just ended with Ranger School and continued on to today. I mean, there's just that hardiness was built. A lot of it was built there and what it stood for. And it was the hardest thing that I had done at that point in my life. and going through that experience, I think, is just so essential to build that hardiness in individuals. And so that was right after graduation. That was my train up. And then I graduated Ranger School. I was in Fort Benning, Georgia as a graduate, had my Ranger tab. I was a second lieutenant, so Butterball lieutenant. That was airborne qualified. And I was about 3 weeks from going overseas to join my unit. If you want me to talk about that, I go overseas, I join, take commercial airliner, get to Italy, get to my station. The first day I'm there, there's a funeral. So as somebody passes away in Afghanistan, they fly the bodies back, have a memorial service at our unit in Italy first, with typically the family or somebody from the family, and then the body is brought back to the United States, where they're brought to Arlington or wherever the resting spot is. So here I am, I'm going to Italy. I'm all smiles knowing that this unit is in war, but it's not hit me yet. I haven't been around death or anything at that particular point in my life. And then I go there, I put my uniform on. Hey, Lieutenant Richard, we got to go over to the chapel because we're going to do a memorial for one of the soldiers that just passed away yesterday. So that's how quickly the transition happens.
Yeah,
And
wow.
then, yeah, so that happened. And I knew it was real when, like that next day, I was only in Italy for like 3 or 4 days. Usually they let the lieutenants or anybody transitioning and going to the unit stay there for 3 or 4 weeks, get their household goods, get their living arrangements set, uh, get, you know, implemented into the units. And that didn't happen. They're like, we need you over there like right away. So 4 days later, I'm on a commercial transport. I take it from Aviano, Italy. I believe, I think it was a C5 Galaxy that I was on right away, the biggest military transport, almost like a Russian Antonov, and went straight into Kandahar to go link up with my company, which was amazing, and really start the fight. And that's the next 4 years of my life is really the story of Afghanistan and everything surrounding Afghanistan.
But before then, had you been to Italy, or you went straight from West Point to Ranger School,
I'd
and then?
actually, I mean, travel wise, I had played 3 weeks of high school hockey for my boarding school in Austria and Switzerland. I think we might have touched maybe the Bolzano Dolomite region
Mhm.
of Italy, but no, I had never really been to Europe other than when I was an 18-year-old kid
Yeah,
playing
wow.
hockey. Yeah.
And then you ended up being there only for a few days before you flew off to Kandahar.
Yeah, 4 years. 4 years. I had my residence, 3 bedroom, 2 bath apartment downtown Vicenza on Via Quattro Novembre, which is a beautiful street, um, cobblestone lined right downtown in Vicenza. And I was there 9 months out of those 4 years. I was either
Wow, wow,
deployed or in training the rest of the time,
right.
which was a fantastic experience.
So deploying basically immediately to Kandahar, you hadn't yet met up. You hadn't really linked up with your platoon, with your team. What was that like? I guess initially connecting with them, and how did the cohesiveness occur? I mean, did you have a workup before you actually went out? I see you laugh, so I guess I know the answer to that, but let's hear it.
There is no workout.
Wow.
So I flew into Kandahar. Uh, my first company commander, Mike Klepper, who is now in charge of the Corps Cadets at West Point.
Hmm.
He's the colonel in charge of just the Corps itself and the discipline, the regiment of them. He was my first company commander. Spent most of his time in the Ranger Regiment. Big, strong, hulking dude. Extremely, exceptionally tactically competent. Was already fighting for his life with his platoons um, in Afghanistan, in Kalat area, Kalat um, province, which is just northwest of Kandahar. And he had fought there in the Rangers a few years before that. But my link up was kind of funny. I get there, he's like, "Oh, hi, Lieutenant Richard, how are you?" And then I was like, "All right, great." He's like, "Go get your running stuff on." We're at, it's like 120 degrees, so of course he wanted to take me for a run, which he did with me. Hopefully at some point he hears this video, but he'd go taking me on these challenging runs, be like, "Hey, are you going to be physically fit to do this?" I was like, man, I was able to keep up. But right after that, we jumped on a helicopter, and he took me to one of the platoons, first platoon leader, Mark Bush, which became one of my best friends in the unit. And he was in this place called Des Chopin, and his little mud hut was getting attacked on probably a 2 times a week basis. So they were in the fight. And so we basically took a helicopter to there so I could experience what a fight looked like. I was there for one night. The first thing that I did outside the wire in Afghanistan, outside the helicopter, he's like, "Hey, Lieutenant Richard, get your stuff on. We're going in this Humvee. We're going to go up to this mountain." And he essentially wanted me to go hike a mountain and see if I could make it up the hill. And I remember it was a Humvee gun truck with a 249. I think it was a 249 on the back of the gun truck. And um, I got up inside the turret because there's no spots to sit. He took the command seat. He's got a driver, and I think we got one of the lieutenants and the platoon sergeant from that platoon there. And I got up in the turret. I'm sitting there with the gun. I'm looking around. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I getting my first fight? And I just remember Klopper screaming at me. My first 5 minutes outside the wire. What are you doing on the gun? Do you know the maximum effective fire for that weapon? Do you know how to even shoot or gauge or what you're looking at? And I was like, holy crap, this is really real. I got my company commander within the first hour of me inside a forward operating base, just dogging me bad, which I totally appreciate at the end of the day for what we went through together.
Mm-hmm.
You needed that harsh reality. I made it up that hill and I was like, man, that's really hard. Came back down. And then the first time I met my platoon, um, there's this guy, Luke Langer, that has the platoon. He went to the Ranger Battalion afterwards, became my good buddy there. But he essentially had that platoon the first 2 months of deployment. I had it the last 10 months of deployment. And we basically have this con op, so this big military plan that we had. And we went out there. And I remember I linked up with Luke and the platoon. I just did a right seat ride with him, which is getting to know the platoon, knowing the squad leaders, knowing the platoon sergeant, having a week with them in transference to kind of talk through what's it like to be a platoon leader in combat, besides the Ranger skills from Ranger school that I had, to show me how real it was, and setting up stand to and effective fire ranges and really getting ready to get attacked. And I didn't get attacked in that first week, but that was my first introduction. We get in that set of helicopters. We go to an even more austere area of Afghanistan called Kak Afghan, which was about, I'd say, 90 miles north of this Des Chopin area. At I think it was 8,900 feet up in the mountains, and the Taliban had blown out this bizarre area that had a school and a couple of shops, and basically all of the roof structures were completely off of everything. And I remember there was a well in the middle of that camp, and it did have walls and 4 different points around those walls. And we did like 8 days of missions with my company commander, with my squads, trying to build confidence with them, showing them that I'm a good human, that I'm going to be right alongside with them, doing everything, that I'm not going to be overly commanding of them. Right. That's the platoon sergeant's job. I'm there really for strategy and control over that and reporting back to our company commander. And at the end of that mission, which was pretty grueling, Captain Klepper was like, "Hey, Jet, you're going to be here for a little bit." I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" I've got a rucksack filled with like maybe a change of clothes, and that's about it. He's like, "No, your whole platoon's going to stay and rebuild this whole area the next 10 months. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So I had one of the most eye-opening combat platoon leader, austere airborne ranger experience. It was awesome. I mean, it was hard. It was awesome. We went through really miserable and difficult things. We lost a lot of fantastic humans up around those mountains. We lost villagers around those mountains. But we did a lot of fascinating things for that population. I think we built some goodwill. Obviously, we know what happened with that goodwill here in the last few years, which is really challenging for our fellow classmates and everybody else that served around that time. But we essentially got a pot of money, Afghani money, and Pakistani money, and we paid Hazaran workers, which are native, more Western Chinese, Eastern Afghanistan dialect and tribe, and got them and some Pashtun and Pakistani workers, and we started rebuilding like that whole area by hand and mud. And so we lived without we were killing chickens the first month and a half. We were given like UNESCO bags of rice that we heated in pots, and then eventually we started building it up over time to where we actually had a satellite dish 3 months into our deployment flown up there with a generator, and we had them hardwire our mud hut, which was just cots on mud and hardwired so we could have some connectivity and didn't feel like it was Lord of the Flies out there. So it was a really fascinating experience that was really the most exhilarating time in my life, probably the most dopamine hits that I've ever had in my life. And but you just learn a lot about humans and the human condition and people, and how to act around people and how to fail around people and what's right and wrong. And to see despair of people and to see the human element of soldiers really scared, like these tough airborne, paratroopers that, once you get shot at and once you get bombed, it's really a whole different human level experience that we had to negotiate. And the rest is kind of, that was what it was like for 3.5 years of my life as I went through that chain of command, and was really in that same unit up until my last 7 months before I left the Army. So I was in the second of 503rd, originally the parachute infantry regiment, which is basically a group of 500 to 600 paratroopers. And I did my combat platoon leader time, and came back to Vicenza as an executive officer of the headquarters company from that same battalion called the Black Sheep. And the Army had this doctrinal switch from a parachute infantry regiment to Airborne Brigade combat teams. So there's this realignment that basically doubled the size of battalions and of units, especially that parachute infantry regiment that became a brigade of folks, again, to grow more people over that organization. So I was second in charge of 319 people in my second job, and anything from cooks to medics to mortarmen to snipers to finance folks and HR. I was basically chief of staff of a headquarters element in the infantry, and I did that for a year, and then the train up was, we're going back to Iraq. It wasn't even a year; it was like 10 months. We went to Germany for 3 of those months and trained, and we were expecting. This is now 2007 timeframe, and Iraq is really just a horrible spot and a lot of dismounted fighting in urban environment. We were trying to train for that, and with like a month and a half, 2 months to go before that Iraq deployment, we got diverted back to Afghanistan, into the worst area of Afghanistan, really for the whole entire war. And I didn't like my third job in the unit, but it was a necessary job, and I could see it looking back 15, 20 years, and knowing it was really necessary what I was doing. And I was probably a little selfish about my career progression, which kind of happens. And, it's a little bit of a dogfight for growing up and wanting to become a colonel and general, and work your way through the military regimented way. And I knew that this job, I was basically a nighttime battle captain. Now they gave me a really nice title. They wanted me to be an assistant operations officer, is really is what happened. But to learn and understand is I was up from midnight to 12 noon every day. Most of the fights started off at 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock at sunup in the morning. And the colonels and the majors in my battalion that were doing a lot of the hard work and strategy needed somebody that had been with the battalion for a couple of years that they could trust to start the fights and kick them off, and having these ticks, troops in contact. So about an average of 7 fights a day for 15 months over that deployment. It was me starting up and getting all of our assets ready, and then going and waking up our colonel and a couple majors that I worked for, and making sure they were prepared and had an assessment of the battlefield to support our troops and put them in the best position to win. And that was just a really audacious, crazy, hellacious deployment where a lot of people were lost. And um, yeah, just so many wide range of emotions to look back at it. And I think it made me a better human. I mean, I think a lot of us were angry at that time. We lost over 30 people in our unit. We were really decimated. And there were some good news stories, but when people are getting medals of honor from your unit, you know, a lot of bad things are happening. So we had the first 3 Medal of Honor recipients after the Vietnam War that were in
Wow.
our 500-man element, starting with Sal Junta, that was a sister medic to the platoon that I had in the previous deployment. So I think he was either first platoon medic or third platoon medic at the time. So he, Obama presented him the first Medal of Honor after after Vietnam. And not only that, all 3 of those men lived and told
Wow.
really courageous, crazy stories. Um, so I did that job for 8 months as an assistant operations officer. And man, it was just tough to not be able to be out in the field because I was in the Army TOC, although we were in a
Yeah.
really bad area, but we still had 200 or 300 people built up at that location. We're probably the last to get attacked, although we did get mortared and shelled at times. But to see your really close friends that are in command and your former soldiers really taking it on the chin, although they brought it to the enemy, you know, you lose one soldier, that's where it starts. That's the math. You lose one, it's tough enough. And
Yeah.
our first day in combat, we lost private a private that was the our sergeant major's son. So Sergeant Major Viamoto lost his son on day 1 on the
Mm.
first fight in Afghanistan, and it was just like that, the Wild West, the whole rest of the time.
Yeah.
And so after that job, just to tie in the rest of my Army experience, I went from there. We got redeployed in 2008, and I became the brigade air officer in charge of jumps for the whole brigade. I planned the 65th anniversary D-Day jump into Normandy with my unit, and I left and got out of the Army a couple of months before they made that awesome jump.
Wow. On that third deployment, I was going to ask, and I think you said it. Tell me if I picked it up incorrectly. I was going to ask why you were frustrated, at least at the time, with that assignment, and I think you answered it, which is kind of what I was, presuming or putting myself in your shoes, which is, you were more so in kind of HQ, I'll call it, uh, you know, understanding orders and understanding command versus being in the field with the team. Is
Yeah.
that what was frustrating about that position?
Yeah, I think I mean good and bad parts of it. Um,
Mhm.
Number one, I'd been a combat platoon leader um, successfully. I brought all 39 men home. Nobody was injured. A lot less fighting. Um, so there was that to it. But the way we were tied into the population, the way we conducted missions, the way we conducted shuras, the money that was provided to us to really build up the populace and set the Afghan population up for success was just a lot different than what happened um, the second time around in Konar Valley, right, which is the Valley of Death. It's where the SEAL team got shot down. We infilled for the SEAL team, Lone Man Standing, that movie that was made about them. So we were in that same area along the Dari Pesh River. And, a lot of it is just looking back and just frustration, knowing that you're not in command of the structure and strategy of what's going to happen
Mm.
and feeling so hopeless to the events of what happened. And then I wouldn't say it's survivor guilt, but
Yeah.
there's definitely something to being a combat platoon leader, being an executive officer and going to battle and seeing things from a screen and just being like, you feel like a caged animal. And you're like, just one more officer out there might be able to help the fight, or you just get into this kind of rhythm of why you think things could be better. And, I look back at those leaders and, this is at the battalions are really at the tactical level. You have brigade commanders and you've got 1-star generals of joint force tactical units that are telling you really how to set up and block and do things for things that you can't comprehend and understand. You might be Delta Force or Special Forces operators or CIA that are doing things in an area, and all you know that you're getting shot at and you're blocking a position that makes no sense to you.
Yeah.
So the more well informed me had, be 45 next week. It's just, it's a different understanding. And I have a lot of respect for the people that I
Mhm.
served with, and they were put in really difficult decisions. And you learn over time, you don't play armchair quarterback unless it's something immoral or illegal. It's hard to play armchair quarterback for people that had to make really difficult decisions that led to folks dying or led to us winning, but they did the best they could with the resources they had. And, guy like Colonel Oslin in particular, that Major Himes, two guys that really had um, probably one of the most difficult combat, stressful leadership experiences, since Vietnam. It was that bad, and a lot of bad things happened, and a lot of good happened for what we tried to do in those 15 months. So I think you just get angry at the circumstance, right? if
Yeah.
if 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 we are overrun by a group of Al Qaeda and Taliban fighters, and we've got a platoon and 200 people overrun a platoon, and we feel like we didn't have the information and knowledge of it impending and happening, it's a really hard thing to know that, you 5 or 6 men die on those days, or 9 men on our last fight die in the Battle of Wanat. And there's movies made after this stuff for a reason. And there's a lot of lessons learned from it, and it hurt a lot of people's careers. And it's something that you just build emotional intelligence that the people are. What I do understand now is people really do the best they could do, trained at that high level. And, there are decisions that aren't the best decisions, but man, operating as quickly and flexibly that they had to move to make those decisions to fight Al Qaeda and people up in the mountains that we could barely even see was just something that none of us are going to forget. And to see people be successful and learn from those experiences themselves.
Mhm.
There's a lot of great officers still in that were company commanders that are now brigade commanders that we all served together, and to kind of watch their journey and to watch the awareness that they put into their people. It's really neat to see it. I know there's a lot of bad things on social media, but to see this healthy dialogue between cadets and officers, or units and officers, it really makes us aware where we're weak and where we're strong. And I think that when you don't have all that information, you're young, 27, 28-year old, and you're like, I'm not doing anything. There's just a lot of anger, and some of it's misdirected. I think some of it I used in the right way, but it's nonetheless, I loved everybody in that unit, and it's
Yeah.
just tough.
Yeah, very very well said. Very well said. Um, so I did list off a handful of medals, awards that you achieved, earned during your service. Can you touch on any one or two in particular that are really memorable for you and how they happened?
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that anybody getting in fights that was a combat platoon leader or company commander, Bronze Star with Valor. Those kind of things are fairly typical. I have a lot of friends that have Silver Stars, Bronze Star Vs, Air Medals, like that did things that were just way harder and put in much harder leadership predicaments as myself. I would say my Navy medal was pretty unique because there's not a lot of Army folks that get that. But there was this gentleman, Commander Legree. He was a colonel. He was the '06 commander in the Navy, and he was in charge of like provincial reconstruction, which is kind of tied to what I do a little bit today. But I was able to work with the Navy and the New Zealand Army, and I was in charge the last 7 months of that deployment. I was basically the governor of Kunar province, Governor Wahidi. I was basically his army liaison to him. So I was a part of that team for intel. We built this really austere building, and I was training up Afghans to learn how to have an intel cell and have a transportation cell, and teaching a lot of education. There's a lot of coaching, teaching, and mentoring of map skills and of radio signal skills and things of that nature. But we also had U.S. aid attached to us for well water assessments at the time, 2007, 2008. They were doing a lot with looking at crop sharing and how to get the poppy, and getting poppy that was being sold in the black market and that eastern border of Afghanistan over to Pakistan and then out into Europe and everywhere else, to eradicate that for better crops and better studies. So I was part of a lot of those educational things. I didn't have any command of those, but I learned a lot about how agencies go in And it's not nation building, but it's how do you allow the people to stand on their own 2 feet before we pick up and leave. And I was given a medal for some of the work that I'd done tied to that unit, which it was a very thankless type of
Mm.
job. I had a lot of I had known I'd probably gotten the job because I told my commander, I was very honest. I said, "Hey, I'm done after this deployment. I'm doing my 5 years. I'm out. I've been fighting essentially the whole time I'm in. I want to start a family." But that was really neat. I think the other thing too for new lieutenants, especially in the combat arms, there's a combat action badge and there's a combat infantryman's badge, right? Combat infantryman's badge means that you were in a fight. I think gaining that badge in my first fight it was great. I got
Mm.
my medal. I got to say that I was part of that. And then you're like, I wish I never earned it. You get so gun ho as a cadet or in ROTC and learning how to become a platoon leader. I mean, you're essentially training for fighting as a platoon in combat. That's what essentially you're doing your whole entire schooling when you ever have a chance to do any military training. And to get that medal and what it represents was important to me. It was I was now part of the clan of everybody else that was with my unit in Iraq and had fought already. And but it's something that you learn over time, especially in a combat unit in wartime, that no fighting and a lot of building up of the population and giving them the tools to be successful socioeconomically and politically and so on and so forth is a much better leave behind than being known for fighting. So, the Bronze Star was very typical of everybody there. I wouldn't say there's anything else. We got in some pretty crazy fights. A really cool story, not that we're bringing work into it yet, but so there was one fight that we were pinned down, started with sniper fire. We had been fought the night before. We went and chased these guys down a riverbed. We got basically attacked from 3 different areas of a mountain. We were kind of stuck there for 7 hours and we were fighting for our lives. And we called in an A-10 Warthog fighter jet, which was the only airframe on station. So for close air support, we called them in. They took care of the enemies. And then 20 years later, we are currently building at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base the last A-10 Warthog fighter jet center that's
Mm.
ever going to be in existence because Congress just shut down that whole program. So just full circle to see things that saved my life. It was interesting. I remember when the bid came out to go build this building in Tucson, Arizona. I told my whole staff, I'm like, there's no way we're losing this job. I'm telling the customer we're going to go build this thing. And so we're building it right now. And we're in the middle of building it in Arizona, and they're going to transfer it to a much more versatile aircraft. But I will tell you, for all the folks that served probably 2013 and before that had been in crazy fights in Afghanistan and really audacious areas, that seeing the A-10 um, going into retirement is a pretty sad day because I could tell you it saved so many people and it scared off so many of our adversaries. But to get more asymmetric fight like we're doing now, and I understand the need for a different aircraft. But that was a cool, unique tie to what my past was.
Very cool tie, and I've heard the same type of feedback on that Warthog too. Yeah, unfortunate reality, but nonetheless, awesome story. I'm really glad to hear that you got that project and that you're building it out. Very cool. So it sounded like when you're talking about the end of your service, that was around that D-Day jump. Is that correct?
Yeah, the great unit, 500 people, got to go jump in France
Mm.
and put on the old school replica World War II uniforms and jump in. And I told you I had hated heights. I had made sure that I didn't jump out of a plane after Afghanistan. I'm like, just my luck, I would probably go jump and get hurt out of a plane in peacetime.
Yeah.
We weren't in peacetime, but just I was outside of my deployment cycle. So I planned that thing for days with a good friend of mine that was Major Birdie at the time that did a ton of work. And then there was this Lieutenant Galliant that was enlisted guy that was incredible. I think he saved me in a lot of ways, writing up some of the op order stuff. Hopefully he gets to hear this at some point. But yeah, that's a cool part of history. and I still haven't been to Normandy. I'm going to be really appreciative of going there and being a part of that history. And yeah, that was my last duty before I went into the private sector.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, it's a really powerful place to just stand in and absorb
Yeah,
the history and what happened there. And I can only imagine, exponentially more so in uniform. So
sure.
that's really amazing that you got to be part of that. So walk us through now at this point, finishing your enlistment, and moving forward from there.
Yeah. So I luckily met the love of my life, who's now my wife of 14 years, May 29th. And so I met Meredith towards the end of my time in Italy, and she came and lived with me in Italy the last 6 months. And I knew I wanted to start a family. And the transition, I mean, there's so many everybody's got a unique transition story, but my transition story when I was in between tour 2 and 3, which is one big 15-month deployment. I went to go meet I knew I wanted to get into construction at that point. So it was either real estate development, construction. We had some ties to the big development and construction company out of New York City. And I had a handshake deal 9 months before the deployment ended to go start and work there. Meredith um, was going to go to grad school for childhood development in New York City. So we're going to land our roots there. 9 months later, as I'm sitting in the hotel getting ready to get on a plane to come back to the States and be out of uniform, get an email from their CEO. Jed, really bad news through email. I still had little tiny Nokia phones, I think, in Europe. Jed, really bad news. The 2008-9 recession has depleted us. We are in a hiring freeze. We can't bring you on staff. So that was my first holy crap moment,
Mm-hmm.
transitioning into the civilian sector that I was so unprepared for because I didn't do anything after those
Yeah.
9 months. I had a great job lined up. I had a handshake deal with the COO and the president and the CEO, and it's what I wanted to do, and I totally pivoted on that. And actually ended up going to work for my parents' small construction company, about a $3 million a year operation, as the chief operating officer, a $3 million operation, and hung on for dear life for 6 months to figure out how Meredith and I really wanted to grow our family. And
Mm-hmm.
after about 6 months, Meredith's like, Connecticut and living back where you grew up's not for us. Let's go back to Chicago where I grew up and start a family, which was a good transition for me too, because I knew I wanted to be a builder. I knew that part of this, I felt like it was an obligation to try to run my parents' small excavation company of 30 years. But it was very apparent when I was working for my dad that, at that point, he was probably 62, 63, and he was going to work until he could barely stand up. And I wasn't there to go take a paycheck from somebody within a $3 million small business company, very entrepreneurially run, with my dad working out of machines and then bidding at night on the kitchen table. And I wasn't about to do that. And I had to go learn how to be my own man outside the military. And then the rest is history with the transition. Talking career before starting my company, I went straight from Connecticut. I went to go work for the Walsh family, which is a big, prestigious construction company, the Walsh Group out of Chicago. They're a top 15 general contractor in the United States. um, I was given a lot of responsibility at a very early age, and given a lot of autonomy on top of being in a learning environment where I was able to basically go anywhere I wanted to, with people like Dave Marchiori that ran their building group, that was the president of a $1 billion unit. This guy Mike Whalen that was president of it, and then Dan Walsh was essentially my mentor by the time I rolled out of there, which owned the company. He and his brother Matt. So at Walsh, I mean, I guess the unique thing that I was able to do there is after a couple of years, I was about 32 years old. I wrote the business plan for their first international company,
Mm-hmm.
which they blessed off on. So it'd been 112 years, I think 1898. Matthew Miles Walsh, the first guy, uh, started up a really small construction company. And 112 years later, I'm telling him through my military experiences that I think we could go and do governmental work overseas. And that transitioned to us building US embassies globally. So my claim to the fame, if I did that, is I did Walsh's probably first and only embassy. At least I led part of the pre-construction on it in Oslo, Norway. So I spent some time in Norway. It was a $179 million building. Post-COVID, it'd probably be a $400 million building with the inflation and the costs. But so I essentially relegated myself into becoming a global constructor and took a lot of pride in building this Walsh global unit that they had. And I built secret compartmentalized information facilities inside of Walsh so we could do both classified and unclassified work, and built out a business unit inside of there at a fairly young age. And then I transitioned from Walsh. I worked for one other company before starting mine called Pernix Group, which is an ENR top 400 company. I think they're sitting like 150. It was an over-the-counter publicly traded construction company, which was interesting to me. I was given a lot more leadership. Actually, the day I came there, I became basically an interim president for the company as their president left, took most of their construction team with them that was working on embassies. Wow. And so I had a really good relationship with the CEO of a publicly traded company that was looking to go into mergers and acquisitions and look for the next way to expand in the US and abroad. So I was a pretty unique part of that process and of finding that. And we brought in Grant McCullough, which was chairman of AECOM, which became a little bit of a mentor of mine. He became one of the chairman advisory guys to Pernix, and we went and bought two companies, B&K, which is KBR's basically, let's call it commercial group in the southeastern United States. We bought that from them. And then we bought this one other company called Dick Pacific for Guam ambitions and moving Japan and the Korean fighting forces over into Guam, which has been a buildup now for the last 10 years or so. So I did that. And then I was traveling all over the world, and kind of the epiphany that I had in having to leave Pernix and start my own company. Number one, I had a 2-year-old. My wife was pregnant with our second boy. We have 3 boys, young boys. And I was on the road all the time. And not only was I on the road all the time in Europe and all over the place, I was also working back with units back in the States. So I was doing 16, 17, 18-hour days around the clock and really burning myself out. And I was in Beirut, Lebanon. So after Benghazi, there was the State Department told its contractors, which there was 5 of us, that they need to build in their lock and leave posts, which I could explain in a second. But what the requirement was to make all of the embassy buildings that were outside of the wire, outside of the fortified main building, that they would be brought into those after Benghazi, and that each of the 183 different consulate or embassy locations would have a Marine Guard headquarters built there. So over the next year, I was going around the country assessing those locations and building temporary facilities out of sea containers for Marine Guards to stand post and really take care and secure our embassy facilities after Benghazi. So I did that, and I got into some very dangerous areas of the world to include like Ashgabat, Turkmenistan, right on the Iranian border. And I was in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico during the drug wars, and Beirut. I pulled myself off of a plane. I was supposed to go to Sana'a, Yemen, where there was bombings going on as I was doing this, and I was very well protected. I'm like, I got to go start my own business and bring things back to reality. So that was the transition. I had spent basically 6 years after the Army learning how to be a general contractor. And it wasn't me wanting to start my own company. I really wanted to just be a leader of a big company, whether it was president or CEO. That was my goal and aim. And what I found over those 6 years is that I was a culture builder first, and I was a permanent building builder second, and that to grow really great organizations with the right culture takes culture first attitudes. And I knew I would never be able to do that unless I had my own thing. And that was really the genesis of me going off on my own and starting my company.
That's an absolutely incredible story and an incredible, I don't know, trajectory to where you're at today. Um, during that time frame, and I mean, this could even include until now, right? When we talk about this transition, military to civilian, it doesn't like end at some certain point. I mean, it's this ever evolving thing.
Mm.
But for the sake of, providing feedback or hindsight advice, what kind of advice would you give in that specific transition period of a few
Yeah.
years? I'll call it.
So one of the most exciting things I do is I talk to a heck of a lot of transitioning military veterans.
Mm,
We've got a lot of service academy company people that work at this company. I just hired my first colonel, Eric
mm,
Crispino, who's doing phenomenal. He's a program manager. He was a leader in the Corps of Engineers, Louisville District. He was commander there, 26 years in service. So it's like, how do you transition? There's all these different levels. There's JMO recruiting cells and junior military officers, which are usually early majors and below. And then you've got this other kind of major lieutenant colonel area. Then you've got your careerists, right? Your light colonels and full bird colonels that spend 20 years forward. And so the way I look at it and the way I give advice, because I think I, probably about 200 officers and enlisted folks, I've spent a heck of a lot of time. It's actually one of my most cherished things that I do
mm,
on the side of running a company. But there's a couple of things depending on where you fall into, and those are the three bands. It's the JMO band, it's the mid career. Okay, I can't quite make it to 20 years because I just am not feeling it. And then there's the, oh my gosh, I've lived in the military organization my whole career. I lived and breathed it. That's all I know. That's all my family knows. How could I make my family
mm,
successful and do it? So what I would say is this: a common thing around each of those, although the time span to be successful is a little different, right? GMO's got a lot more time to make more impact in an industry that they want to. But what I tell people, what I tell anybody leaving the military, is that you got to look at it in a 10 to 15 year increment, and you have to write the story backwards,
mhm,
right? You have to say and spend a lot of time soul searching, and it doesn't have to feel comfortable, and you don't have to have the answer right away. You don't have to have the right answer in your first job, especially if you're a JMO. But, if you're a colonel at 45, 50 years old and you've got 15 years to make a good, decent amount of money and let your wife or your husband, the military spouse and the family have a normalcy in their life without deployments, um, you have to know a bit about what gets you going. And there's two bags. So we use Culture Index, Dean Bunshaw, one of the founder Bunker Labs that works with us a lot, tied to studying. So we do a lot of testing on people to find their zones of genius and what makes them tick. The first thing I want to find out in somebody coming out of service is, are they a tactician? Are they an operator? Right? Are they in the weeds?
mhm,
Do they see through the weeds, or are they just stuck up here? And being stuck up here is fine. They're very strategic. They're very strategic, visionary, focused. They've got a lot of pie in the sky ideas. There's no right answer. Having the awareness coming out of that military transition and oh, by the way, when you go to a Fortune 5,000 or 500 and you go to these JMO headhunters and you go take a test and you don't know why you took it, that's what they're looking for. They're
mm,
looking for, can this person run the third night shift at a factory at Amazon for us? And is that person going to go want to quit in like 3 weeks? Like, there's a profile for that human. That's not a bad thing. And it's
mm,
not a bad thing for an employer to profile you into your zone of genius instead of your zone of weakness, is what I would say.
sure.
It's really important to be self-aware as early as you can. The nice thing about it, if you're on a deployment and you're in the military, there's a lot of time sitting around. There's a lot of stuff inside your head that you could start journaling and thinking. But what I would say is, come up with a 10 or 15 year template, whether you're a 25, 30-year-old leaving as a JMO, or if you're a 50-year-old, and start thinking, what is purpose and what is meaning to you? And then you should look at mind, body, and soul. I love that you're talking about wellness and asking me about wellness. You should look at what is going to make you and your family successful.
Mm,
Now, there's some people in the dynamic between husband and wife, depending on whatever side that they're on, who's the professional. If it's a stay-at-home person, hey, you go make the money. I'm staying home with the kids. There's a lot of military families like that, right? Because quite frankly, one of the most underserved populations are primarily female veteran spouses that for 20 years weren't able to build. I mean, they just gritted it out. They did the best they could. They became parts of clubs tied to the unit. If somebody, fell ill or sick or wounded or died, they were part of that program, right? These unbelievably gifted women that were so underserved that sometimes they want to be their time after. And sometimes, especially I'd say, longer you go across that continuum from that JMO to that mid-level leader to that senior level sergeant major, E8, E7 and above, it's like you have to do not undertalk. In the military, we tend to not talk about these things, and we tend to be very robotic with our feelings. And I think the world's getting better at that. But one of the greatest conversations, and if that's through therapy or through best friends or sitting with in-laws, to sit there and have a conversation about what is success for us. Because I will tell you, 99 times out of 100, success isn't getting the $150,000 job in the civilian sector over the $120,000 job. What cost does that come with? And what do you want out of your 15-year plan? Some people only need $80,000, $90,000 a year between both incomes to go travel in a van, go see the world, make a little supplemental income, and be physically fit and do every ultra marathon that they want to. And that's who they want to be to the world. So if you could write your tombstone worthy pose at first and think about that going backwards, what do you want the world to think about you? And as you get older, it's not about what everybody else thinks. What do you want to be to the world? So having a tombstone worthy exit out of the military into what you want to be is so extremely vital that you think about that. Now, as you go down that continuum, you have to, through as many advisors and friends of friends that you could. I connect so many different people. You have to feel an industry that you could be successful as quickly as possible. For JMOs, sometimes they say, I just care about what the paycheck looks like. I'm going to go work in oil and gas, and I'm going to go around the world working on rigs, but they're going to pay me twice as much. I'm so rich, I'm so wealthy, whatever that means to them. You might be the most unhappy human with family and friends and what that does to your social life and to your wellness and mental being, that you have to fight through those things. So for your JMOs, 30-year-olds and younger, enlisted folks getting out, you've got a lot of time that if you look at your 15-year plan, you should start thinking of what bucket of skills do I want to start to acquire? Because that toolkit is going to be so vitally important. And the private sector cares about two things. There's two things that I tell all of the military folks that come here. The people that go all the way to the top that run business units that become my vice presidents or presidents of the companies that we own. We have 5 different companies. The people that lead those organizations, you know how to make net profitability for the company consistently and fairly with your customers. Or number 2, you know how to build teams. You know how to coach, teach, and mentor teams with succession planning to build the organization in its growth mode. It's very different than the expectations of a soldier, an elite war fighter, and an elite SF officer, right? An elite general. And you see that. And I think part of having the awareness of where your strengths and weaknesses are, it's not that businesses don't want to accept you. Businesses do care about the skills that you did acquire from your military experience. Number 1, they know you got this grit and gratitude for the process, and you've got these values, and that you're going to be above board compared to a normal civilianized population. They just know that. But they also want to know over time that you're in with them, that you like the industry that you're a part of, right? We see very clearly people that are there just to learn skills and leave. I mean, we do such a good job weeding those out now. I would say I don't see it as much anymore, but there's a difference between a human that's just still so smart, but grittier than everybody else. I love it. and puts all their teammates before them. Businesses see these people. It's not a see me, see me, see me. In order to rise in any company, for a military leader, which is really hard to do, those first 5 years, if you transition as JMO and you try to fight through everybody to the top, you are going to lose all those people that eventually are going to have to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
So the people underneath you at the bottom actually hire and promote the people above them. So learning how to be a really empathetic team builder, right? Very tactically competent in what you could do. And that's the other thing too. As a JMO, when you come out, if you don't know the industry, go work a couple different industries,
Mm-hmm.
but eventually settle on one. The people that make a difference in the world, in company life, in business life. And that's not everything. For some people, it's everything that they do in athletics after the Army, or everything they do for their sons and daughters. That's way more important than what they're going to do for a business, right? You've got to build skill sets that are unique to staying in an organization and growing them. And people could see that all day long, and how much you care about that organization to keep going. So those are some of the few key things that I talk about with all these military folks. And I've got some. Bill Watkins, you talked about Lions Pride. I do want to give a shout out to Bill. I learned about Bill in 2017, 18. I've known him for about 6 years. Bill's been kind of one of my main life coaches. At first, it was like kind of a business advisory coach, but we do two things, and it's almost religiously and ritually for me. One is a one-page strategic plan, OSP, one-page strategic plan, OPSP, or an OPS, yeah, OPSP. That's a 25-year plan of what I want to happen with my company and with my career. Mm-hmm. And then there's the O3P, the one-page personal plan. So that's what I want out of life, from religion to community-based building, to finances and net worth, to what kind of home do I want to live in, to what kind of traveling I want to have. I think there's no balance to people that do wonderful things in the private sector. There's an ebb and flow to working really hard one week and crushing it and winning and celebrating, and then slowing it down the next week. But you still have to go above and beyond everybody else, no matter how smart you are, to really lead an organization and do all the after hours work for your people that nobody else wants to do, that never goes away with anything. That's just the one trait in a military leader that I think the Amazons and the Alphabets, where they are going and picking off these really supremely good, energetic leaders, that they know that they'll fight through anything to get the job done, and they care about how successfully it's going to be done. They're going to care about the analytics and the data and the KPIs, and they're going to care about that team becoming world class within the organization. So people on any parts of that continuum have to see how much time they have left in their professional careers, and then they got to start coming up with a plan to fill the toolkit earlier on, or get to the industry as they go further down, that really is going to, they get stabilized and stay in. And maybe they have to go to one or two companies. Mm-hmm. But the people that become presidents and CEOs of companies are people that build all the people underneath them and build this name for themselves inside these companies. Maybe they switch a few times. It's people that I see resumes that switch 5, 6, 7 times in 15 years. There's just not a lot positive that comes of that situation. I think people find themselves in a mental hardship when they know they're switching and they're not getting it right. And it's two ways. The new way of doing it isn't, oh, that company was just a really bad fit. I don't see it that way. I see it, did you research and ask the right questions? Did you ask about their culture? Did you ask about their values? Did you ask about the core purpose? Did you ask to talk to the people in the organization that you're going to be sitting alongside day in and day out? And do you relate to them doing it? And the last piece that nobody thinks about, because they think about the money first, can your organization win? We're in a nimble world now with technology and AI and generation, where companies are going out of business very quickly, right? They're becoming obsolete. You got to know that the team that you're going to work for has a growth trajectory and has a leadership base, has the financial wherewithal to actually grow with your own aspirations. And if you surround yourself with those leaders and those people, I think there's so much that you could do coming out of the military. You're going to get hired. If you come out of the military with any sort of decent resume, there are so many incentives to hire military veterans that's not the question. The real question is, who do I want to be when I'm 50, 60 years old? And what steps am I willing to take back, right? If I made $100,000 in the military, can I take a job that's 80,000 to get all those skills because I know I need that. And I know I can't skip those rungs to get to what I want to be in 20, 30 years. And I think that's the most impactful thing that we implement here at the company and that we're most transparent about. And then transparency, I guess the other key piece, if you're looking at values and attributes of companies, feel the transparency of the company and what they want to do for your long-term career. We have career planning. I spend as much time career planning with our people than actually planning the building of the jobs themselves, because we are looking for people that want to stay here 10 and 20 years. And we realize we have to be ahead of all of our competitors at any time to explain and help them understand and partner with them on their next job positions, the skill sets that they don't have yet, and what their aspirations are. And we want to work with our employees to do that. So those are some things that right off the top of my head that I really talk to transitioning military young folks that haven't been in leadership roles and people that have been very high level tacticians and strategic personnel.
That's amazing, man. I want to recommend that you, write an article, write a book, write something on that, because I think that's incredibly valuable information. And I think it's probably the first time I've heard someone take that approach of like just two macro, I don't call it principles to that, which is one is what were you in the military so that you could then, funnel into the general area that makes sense for you. And then two is patience and perseverance is kind of what I've taken away, generally speaking, which is, patience in obtaining the skill sets, patience in finding your niche, patience in understanding self-awareness, right? What do you want? Who do you want to be, et cetera? And then the perseverance to eventually get there. And I like also that approach of, that the significant time blocks, because I think a lot of times what happens is, well, the mindset is you get stuck in that exact moment of transition. You get stuck in not feeling like you're in the right place. And, naturally so, right? I mean, who wouldn't feel that immediately? So having that long-term goal, I think, is really helpful in kind of pulling you out of that, so long as you're able to continue to recognize that long-term goal periodically, at least. So that's really, really amazing information. I want to push again, man. You got to write a book on this.
And the part about when you look at the perseverance in the long term, celebrations are hard in the private sector. Right? You got to look at organizations that celebrate because they're winning and they're growing. But if you look at it 15 years, you could almost plan out your celebrations. You could plan out when you should be promoted, or when you're going to make this level of pay, or you're going to open up this office for a company. And I think if people could see, and even we've had such, especially since COVID and the fight for talent, these wonderful young construction managers that come out of these awesome schools every day on LinkedIn, they're being asked, here's an extra 10,000, here's an extra 15,000, come work for us. And they're like, oh, I'm making less at Richard Group. But it's like, you don't see, and we're trying to show you even more, because we are showing you more. We're showing you your path to excellence. Stick with us. We see it in you. If you're an A player, we want to bring you along for the ride. We know what your leadership potential is. People want to feel purpose and acceptance, and they want to make a difference. There's so much social media, there's so much going on that people could see all these organizations and snippets. People need to feel appreciated. They need to know that their long-term plans are something that we also want to buy into and invest in. People could feel that. We want, the military veteran getting out and talking to our company about coming here. We want you to come here and trailblaze and set fires and do the best that you can. There's also a tactical patience and poise to be able to get there.
Yeah.
But we want you to go as faster than anybody else has in our industry, but then just get right underneath there and stay. There's a track to that. You can't rush that track.
Yeah. Really well said. Write a book on this, man. You have to.
Thanks.
All right. So we got to the point of you starting your business. I'd love to understand, some, I don't know, thought processes, strategy, things that just came to mind as you were starting that, what I'll call like snowball effect, right? To grow to where you're at today.
Yeah. The snowballing effect, the difference between a $10 million entrepreneur and a $100 million entrepreneur. So our companies will be about $150 million this year.
Amazing.
And in our 10th year, it's be 10 years, October 24th. What I really feel that sets apart people in their entrepreneurial journey, not just a construction or engineering company, it doesn't matter what it is, it could be e-commerce, B2B, it could be whatever you're doing, it could be a marketing company, is having the right structure and planning to take on the additional cost in order to scale. To build the G&A, general administrative costs of the company, to hire that extra secretary, to hire that extra marketing professional, to hire that extra HR person, to screen more employees. The mindset of an entrepreneur, especially a bootstrapping entrepreneur, and when I say bootstrapping entrepreneur, it's somebody that does it with their own funding on their own. The problem is when they feel they got to do it all themselves, and they keep on looking at it as that's $80,000 extra dollars in my pocket rather than hiring somebody to do that 80,000 worth of work. And I think you have to look at in structured strategy to scale and keep on adding those pieces as you gain more traction with more customers and start gaining more revenue. And that's the secret sauce. That's the game. Oh my gosh, I got another contract. I'm going from 4 million to 6 million. Okay. And a year from now, what do we need for that 8 million? And you start planning out the people that you start looking to hire. And that's it. You build that scale all the way up until you go as far as you want to go. The problem is it's very hard to let go for folks, and people, depending on the psyche of the owner and how confident they are in their own growth, they're psyching themselves out. Some people know that they're not going to grow. Or they're too worried about it and they don't want to risk. What I'm trying to say is the entrepreneur has to decide what their own risk reward measures are, and they have to allow themselves to escape those traps and escape those handcuffs. So what I'd say to, and right, Adam, I mean, what's it? 98% of companies in the United States are $1 million or under. I mean, I think that's the entrepreneurial or somebody starting a company. To escape out of that, you have to be really good at selling and being the best at what you are. You have a world-class product or a service. That's it, period. You have to deliver it faster, simpler, more acceptable, more exciting, better product to do and generate something for the world. That's number one. And once you know that people want to buy that, that's when you start building the overhead up. If you look at the people that become unicorn companies, my friends that have built these billion-dollar businesses, they're operating in the red. They've built their overhead up so much because they know how much future capacity and revenue that they're already building for it. And that's traditionally non-bootstrappers that have gone out and got private equity raises, or they got a venture cap partner or whatnot to help them grow that as fast as possible. And a lot of times those are companies that are also looking to offboard, a 5 to 7 year horizon. So depends what type of entrepreneur you want to do. For my sort of service business, the trap is that people fall into, I could do it myself. Every year, I should have hired that marketing manager. I should have hired that home office manager, chief of staff, to free me of all of these things that don't make sense for a future president of a company. And they fall in that trap and they just don't get the growth wheels going.
Yeah. Very, very understandable. It's a position that's, as you put it, right. It's really a trap. That's the best word to put that in.
It's a mental trap. The other part
trap.
to that, the other part to that is, and something I didn't do the first 3 or 4 years. I mean, I was definitely a stress monger in worrying. I mean, I started my company with $60,488. Which was really, sadly, it was my 401k existence after 6 years in the private sector. the part that's not interest accrued. So the part that I could take out free of cost.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it, because I made some bad decisions about not having a W-2 paycheck when I went to go look at borrowing from banks. I'm not going to name the banks. There were big banks that I was involved with at the beginning. And so there's really those mistakes that I made up front in that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you got to know financially where you could be with the company when you start up, the money that you have. If you got this grand idea of $1 billion company and you've only got $1,000 in the bank or 15,000, money runs out a lot faster than people with good ideas,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's another traditional thing that I've seen in entrepreneurs. And the other part is really the first part that I wanted to talk about. I went 3 years without talking to anybody about my business,
Mm-hmm.
right? People think you have a business. They think you're making all this money. You're not. You're really struggling. You're in your head. You're feeling like you're having heart attacks in the basement of your house, working 17, 18, 19-hour, 7-day a week jobs, right? Building this company. Find a herd of people that are going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go find an organization, much like I did with the Lions Pride, which became Flawless Acceleration. Find a business coach, find a cohort of people, and just keep on going up. You do want to be the average of your 5 best friends in business too, right? So keep on, as you keep on succeeding, find people that can succeed and celebrate as much as you have, or that you can. That's the stuff that becomes world-class experience for yourself in what you do and growth for everybody else around you. So that's something that I see people not wanting to spend the money on paying things for the wellness and reflection of them to get them out of this horrible mental headspace, right? And sitting in a basement, thinking they got to work so hard, think they got to go skip their workouts, thinking they got to go eat really fast. And that's when the health effects come. And that's something I went through really early in the process as well. And it's something like, as soon as I went through it, I'm like, I'm going to become the most physically fit CEO of $100 million company and over that's ever been around. And I still am working towards that, but it's changed my life in the way of thinking. So there's just so many things for aspiring entrepreneurs coming out of, if they're coming out of service or whatnot, there's these pitfalls and ways of looking at things. There's a lot of pre-work you could do. I know a lot of times these entrepreneurs that I talk to and I train up, a lot of them want to be at the 100% perfection of every aspect of the business before they start. You can't. It's impossible. Get to the 80%, get somewhere where you could acquire your first customers, your first business customers, your first sales, and do that and go.
Mm-hmm.
Or else you're going to be sitting there for 15 years being the guy at the party that said, I thought of the idea 15 years ago. I should have done that. I should have, would have, could have. The people that put their money on the line, put their money where their mouth is, are the people that succeed if they want to be the entrepreneur that, in
Yeah,
business.
I'm glad you brought up that kind of really just wellness example, uh, feedback, advice, because I think it's generally speaking really underrated in terms of just taking care of yourself and then realizing the impact that taking care of yourself does thereafter moving forward. Right. So
Yeah.
that's a great point.
Yeah.
So
If there's a reflection point if I'd say there's anything in mind, body, or soul that a transitioning military veteran needs to do that they did in the military that works, that makes them healthier than everybody else, go join a gym or a team or fitness group or red, white, and blue. Go find a tribe of people that does something that you want to do. And that could be something after work and joining a softball team and having that camaraderie and having that work group to go hang out with. And the level of stress just automatically declines.
yeah.
It could be just CrossFit. It could be CrossFit. It could be working. If you're fine, you have plenty of friends when you transition out and you've got a gym at your house and you're just crushing weights and you feel good about it, do it. But if you felt great running in the Army and it's hard, but you know how good you felt all day and you want to leave it and be like, I'm not going to run because it was so hard, but man, I loved it. Then next thing you know, the person gains 30 pounds and they feel horrible about themselves. Like that's the first indication of somebody that's not going to be successful on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is stay as physical as you were before. You don't have to hurt your body doing that though. So you have much better equipment and things that you could use. And there's endpoints where you couldn't stop in the military when you're fighting out in war or battle or, physical fitness training and so on and so forth, that you could tailor it to something that's a little bit more fun for you, but don't lose that. And I say I did lose that for about 1.5 years before I got back in.
Yeah, make it easy for yourself. That's what I always like to say. Just find the right time for you, find the right activity for you, find the right group for you, or by yourself, whatever it is. Just make it easy for yourself, and you'll find.
It's not about that money, that $150 to join a gym. People say I'm going to save that $150. The people that don't join the gym spend $300 drinking. So it's go find a club of people that are going to raise that they're going to celebrate with you and raise the bar and keep the metrics, right? If you ran in the Army and you ran 8-minute miles for 5 miles, go run 7. Go figure out how to go on the private sector and eat better food, get better sleep, and go run 7-minute miles and go
Totally.
celebrate when you get there. The celebrations in life for a transition veteran, not just personal celebrations, family celebrations. That's the essence of life. Making, for me, for a helper and me, making the people around you, making your family around you have a life that they never thought they could have in a successful, positive way. That's what totally amps me. And now I've got all these employees and their families and children that are coming and grandchildren. And people are building their second homes in our company. It's just a phenomenal way to see people be happy and live that tombstone worthy life that they never thought they could, really. And it's a big deal.
It is. Yeah. That's the first time I've heard someone bring that up, celebrations as like a means of, just positivity in life. And I really love that concept. I'm definitely going to take that and carry it forward. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, the professional side of things, I want to touch on, I know you've mentioned it a handful of times. I want to just specifically highlight one or two translatable skills, military to profession.
Yeah. It depends on the block in that continuum.
Right.
But number one, character. Not necessarily a hard skill. It's a soft skill. Having character means that you abide by values and purpose, and that you respect authority and the people around you, and you understand that there's a process to things. And you're morally and ethically above everybody else. I will look at a military veteran, know their resume, and I will see people that were their bosses, and I will automatically put them on a pedestal of just personal character that is in a different range than others that we have to seek out. It's just there. The establishment's there. We know what the rigors are. It's just there. I don't, the hardest thing for me to see, and if people are getting away from it, there's so many people talking about it. And it's like the me too, me veteran syndrome, where I got out, I fought in battle, you owe me something. That has got to be completely 180'd when you go into the veteran or into the private sector. The right companies, I'm not saying every company is like this, but if you find leadership in people and you want to go work for leadership that cares about those values and cares about character, and our five, we have the 5 Richard values: gratitude, resilience, excellence, adventure, and transparency. That's the values we live by. Go ask those things of the company you're going to go work for. Go ask those things, because we are begging for you to be that good. That's the thing that the veterans don't get coming out sometimes. They've been poorly managed or poorly coached into gaining a role. CEOs like me want to be able to see somebody come to that organization. I take such pride in military people coming to my organization that we want them to be so autonomous and grow as fast as they can, for as happy as they could be with the stress load that they can manage, with the grit that they want and the impact that they want to have in their lives, the impact and purpose they want to have lives. So number one is that. And I would say a second one, a teammate, team builder. You've got to do in a service-based business, you have to build teams. So I would say that's really important. That's very important in our personnel. I would just say being authentic, another soft skill that I think is so important. People will judge you in 5 minutes in the private sector. They will know if you want to help offer them something, or if you're like an adversarial workmate. They will see that within 5 minutes. And the new world with social media and eyes on everybody and KPIs and metrics,
Mm.
it just pays to be humble. It pays to be authentic. It pays to let people know what you don't know. It pays to compliment people on things that they know that they could teach you. Right. So I think that's a second skill coming out of the military that people have to work on. Um, I think the hardest thing for people coming out of the military is the transparency aspect. So I know you asked me what are a couple transferable skills right away. People have to work and understand that the more transparent they are, and we're not talking about somebody that comes in that's a mental mess with their family and bring it to the workplace. But if you could be authentic and you could be transparent about your emotions, about how people are performing. How many times do you hear people are like, oh, you're working so great, just keep on going. They have no clue what that person's doing, and that person's fired like a few months later. Like knowing how to have crucial, hard conversations with people, authenticity and transparency. It might be the hardest thing. I think the hardest thing in our company to hear are people that come from other organizations where they weren't transparent about the level of progress that they are or
Mm-hmm.
how good they are at their job. I love pulling people in my office and saying, listen, I saw your resume. I tested you out. We thought you were there. We want you to get there. Here are the 4 or 5 things that I feel that you got to fill your toolkit on. This is where you have to put your energy because there's other areas that you're so good at, but this is where the energy needs to go so you can be successful and get to the next spot that you told us you want to get to.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard for military folks because everybody, the way that the 360 formatting and the force blocking that conversation wasn't there. And maybe it's getting better now. I think it is getting better in some ways, but the coaching and teaching and mentoring of others and bringing them up through that process to know that failure is good,
Mm-hmm.
to know that, right, the obstacle, one of the books that you asked, the holidays, the obstacle is the way is in our required reading when you come and get a big box at our company. We want people, and this is a great military trait, that look at a boulder in the way of a path and say, I'm going to go blow it up. I'm going to go crawl around it. I'm going to go build a ladder and go above it. And I'm going to go look and see how much time it takes to do all those actions. And I'm going to go prioritize them. And I'm going to go make sure the people need to come along with me. I'm going to get them over first. And then I'm going to go get myself over. I'm going to go get rid of the boulder for people in the future. Hard is healthy. I think I've coined that term. I use it in a lot of my handles and Instagram and things like that. Hard is absolutely healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that the military has, the civilian sector. People tend to shy away. It's like cliche, but you learn a lot about people in the hardest times in a company, in a private sector company, in jobs that aren't profitable, in really bad mistakes that people have made with customers. And you could see the people that want to refocus and want to take that and build the character from that loss. And you could also see the person that just wants to fold up and go home and start somewhere else and have that
Mm-hmm.
same routine with the next company that they're going to go to. So,
Awesome.
yeah, I think those are the main things. Anybody coming out of the military, they've got so many great traits and character. That's what we hire for. We hire because we see these people that have so much ability to move up the chain of command in our own companies, and we want to celebrate that for them. Now it takes the new military transitioning veteran to look and say, do I want to do the work to get there? And it's
Really
going to be
important.
just as hard. That's do if for as high as you want to go, that's more
Mm-hmm.
obstacles that you're going to have to overcome. Do the hard stuff. And you know what the other part is? Nobody wants a fake celebration. Nobody wants celebratory participation trophies. When you win, you want to feel like you just won.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that every company needs to feel with as part of the ethos of their company. And that's a really big part. It's the story of the bison behind me on the plains
Mm-hmm.
of Jackson Hole and that's why it's there. That's an animal that was decimated by Europeaners and natives and everybody else. It was left to extinction. By the way, the only species of that size of meat and red meat that's supposed to be grazing America, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything else was imported, and those things came back. They could be in Arctic tundras alongside rivers, gaining heat. They're the most resilient animals to me on the planet, and that's why it's our spirit animal. I
That's
mean, people
awesome.
got to feel good about what type of organization, what sort of spirit animal that they're going into, and how much that company is going to enhance their life if they get through the hard obstacles and are willing to participate in the suck.
Love that. Great tips. Love the bison story. Love that it's there. That's really awesome, man.
Yeah.
All right. So to close out the professional side, I want to give you a plug to highlight any career win or wins, plural. Leave it to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's naturally with a growing company, there's personal accolades, which
Mm-hmm.
which are neat little pumps. But what I'm most excited about, we've won all these awards. Inc. 5000 has awarded us for 4 straight years. Cranes Business has awarded us for several years. So we've been a best places to work and a fastest growing company in America for a long time.
Wow.
We won the Syracuse University, the Vets 100 before it was just bought by Chase. We've been, a top 5 veteran fastest growing companies in the United States. 2015, 16, we were a $1.8 million organization. 7 years later, we're supposed to be around $200 million this year. We're going to be a little bit less. But our goal by 2030 is to get to $1 billion. We want to be a unicorn construction engineering development firm. So the growth, and we say this, it's actually in one of our 3 WIGs, so wildly important goals for the year. The growth is awesome, right? That rewards people monetarily. Only as much as people are happy to do what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
that they're excited to be doing what they're doing, that the customer's reputation hasn't diminished. Right. So I'm really happy to be a best places to work because our people want to be here while we're growing as fast as we are.
Mm-hmm.
I guess so. Those are the 2 biggest awards in the U.S. for these companies. And then on a personal note, I've been so Ernst and Young EY Entrepreneur of the Year, which is really big. I lost it 2 years ago to some really phenomenal companies, and then I just won it this year for the Midwest. And there were Dude Wipes is a company. That guy's fantastic. He won Portillo's, which is a massive from the Midwest, Portillo's hot dogs and those sorts of companies won. There's some fascinating Spot Hero was up for the award. So to win that, and I really still feel like it's the start of my entrepreneurial journey.
Mm-hmm.
The plug is we want to be the fastest growing. We want to be the most successful and the most inspiring construction company in America in less than 25 years. We're 10 years through that journey. And, if you look at our core purpose, I mean, that's my plug. We're building to solve the world's greatest challenges for the most important occupants on Earth. And that is a rally cry that I think every builder could get around. We're building fantastic, highly technological buildings and
Mm-hmm.
structures for people that are going through horrible treatments and medical facilities, to soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that need to go work and go fight our next wars and be prepared for our next wars, to data centers and clean water agendas that we have here at this company. We want to be the best in the United States at each of those things. So there's been a lot of healthy, awesome awards that have been happening. And now like I told our people, I feel horrible that I won this award individually and I haven't had people in our own company for individual awards. It's not a spotlight thing for me as the CEO. We need other, 30 under 30, 40 under 40. We want people winning those awards because we want them to be industry level leaders. We
Mm-hmm.
want them to be the educators of what we are doing differently, because there are a lot of differentiators to how we grow our business and what we do. And those are the people that make it happen. I get to be the visionary tactician of the vision and strategy, and people have to believe in me, and customers have to believe that we're really good humans to work with, and that we do care, and that we are transparent. We want to build a world-class building or world-class infrastructure when they do build with us, which that is absolutely what we want every single time, fail-proof. We want our people to feel those successes of individual awards as well. So that will be coming around. I think there's some upcoming people don't know about yet that they're going to be winning, and the rest is history. So I appreciate the time. I appreciate the questions, and this has been a great experience, Adam. Veterans Who Build show. I'll bring it back to other veterans that I know they're great entrepreneurs and just leaders in general. And I think it's such an important thing. Um, there are so many people transitioning out these days. We want them to be successful. There are so many companies that want them to be happy, not just in business, but in life.
Mhm.
And life includes wellness and taking care of yourself. And that's a life skill, right? The Army didn't really require me to take care of myself other than forcing me to run and do push-ups. Everything else got to be on your own. So to live that clean life and clean living is something that I aspire to do. And I pass along as many of the tricks of the trades that I've learned and heard and read about. So thank you for everything.
Thank you, man. That's really amazing. Congratulations on both the business awards and the personal one. I'd suggest that the business awards are, a result of the teams that you built. So that would be the community type of awards, right?
Yeah.
So to close out the show, we got the last two questions. One is wellness practice. What does that look like for you?
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing really well at it. Wellness from a food intake perspective, I'm on this protein supplementing binge with MCT oil, with creatine, with peanut butter, not so much ketogenic. But I go and I do daily fasts a lot, and I
Mhm.
won't, take my first shake at like 11:30, 12 o'clock. I did today was 1 o'clock. By the time I got out of meetings, being so busy, it helps not to eat as much. But building dense muscle, if you listen to Peter Attia and the drive and what it takes for longevity and health span and lifespan, I'm a really big believer in that. I want to be as
Mhm.
healthy as I can, living as well as I can for as long as I can. So that's just something on the food side that's vitally important. I've been trying to cut back on alcohol. And that's not for everybody,
Mhm.
but the goal was to only do it 2 times a month in 2024. I think I've gone over that slightly, but that's a really big deal for me. There's alcoholism all across parts of my family, and I just don't need that vice. And I think the higher you go up, to not have brain fog and to know that you have to be on your game at all times and to not miss your daily workouts and regimens, that's a really big deal.
Mhm.
I've gotten into Go Ruck. So I don't know if you know that, but I just bought a weighted vest a couple weeks ago, a 40-pound weighted vest. I'm going to up it to 60. And I also carry 20-pound dumbbells and go for like 7 to 8 miles and feel like I'm going to pass out and fall over to build that massive muscle density on top of the CrossFit that I already do. So from the physical side, and I play hockey, trying to do it once a week, what I used to do to stay in the team sport game.
Mhm.
From a mental standpoint, I don't necessarily journal. But I progress map and roadmap that one-page personal plan that Bill got me onto, the one-page strategic plan. I am I am in the weeds on personalized plans. I know my wealth planners, they look at me, they're like, "This is the most planned out person I've ever seen in my life." And it's like very regimented, very detailed. I like that level of control to know how much I can risk. So I think that's a really important piece. I think that for anybody finding your spirituality, and that can mean actually going to church, it could be meditating, it could be whatever that is to you. You know, it's personal for me. I don't need to go into my side. I am Catholic. I do attend church, but whatever gets you connected to a higher being and connected to um, something that happens after you're here on Earth, I think is really vitally important because I think it puts so much in perspective and it really shows, especially as we age. I have so much more gratitude for the process and things that got me angered or upset when I was a kid in my 20s, early 30s. Like as I'm going to my mid 40s, you learn to let go of those things. And it's so
Mhm.
vital to your wellness and your health. So that's really important. I have meditation apps, Calm. I have an Aura ring that I wear. Been wearing for, I'm one of their longest term people. I think I just hit 4 years of owning that. I like knowing what
Nice.
my heart rate is. I'm a huge HRV proponent. I want to know what my heart rate variability is. I want to know what my respirations are, especially at night. I want to know how much time I'm getting in sleep. I want to know the temperature of my sleep. That's important. And then building into my house, we're getting saunas and cold plunges installed right now. And it's
Awesome.
something that I already do at the gym, but I have a really good regimen on top of getting up every morning and hitting the gym. I take the train in at 6:05. I'm in the gym at 6:55. I run 3 miles. I lift hard. And I also make sure my employees are doing those same things. And I also bought these Aura rings for everybody, all the top people in my company.
Awesome.
And we do these awesome adventures. We just took 13 people to Iceland in my company for a
Mhm.
leadership retreat, hiking mountains and geysers and doing all sorts of world-class stuff with guides. And we do that up in Jackson Hole. We're taking our junior leaders retreat, which was in Jackson Hole on the water last year. And we're going up into Zion National Park with 15 of our key young kids, key young adults, I should say. And so the adventure side of being up in mountains and feeling what's hard and knowing that there's celebration and getting to the tops of mountains is so important. So that's wellness from a mind, body, spirit kind of perspective.
That's amazing. And for the business.
I know how much it works for me.
Right.
I'm a pusher on things that I think works for me, and I see people, but I push. I'm less of a pusher as I get older, but I'm seeing what it takes. We pay for people to go gym memberships. We have very healthy eating in-house at the company. These are all vital. I always tell my people in construction, and I saw this in my dad's side of the business, you don't want to retire at 65, 70, limping into retirement where you can't enjoy the world and you can't enjoy camaraderie and your passions. So we want people running that limping into it. And it's worth cutting away from a little bit of the profitability that I would be able to put into my pocket. That's not life. And that's not the type of humans we're trying to grow. That's not the purpose that we are. That's not what's going to make us a $5-6 billion company. When I'm
from 100% agree. Even from afar, I could appreciate it. So I'm sure your team appreciates it very much. Absolutely agree with you, man. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Last but not least, favorite book or books that you'd like to recommend? I know you mentioned one. Plug that in again if you'd like.
I mean, I'm listening to Tools of Titans again right now on Audible. Like that's my go ruck. Just listening. I love listening to other successful people. Now they have to be real and they have to be successful and they have to be authentic. There's certain personalities that are all about just, hey, I'm going to 10x your money and everything else. I basically automatically turn it off. But to know the tricks of the trade and just to hear these guys talk about MCT oil for like 30 minutes and what you're supposed to do and things of that nature. So that's a big one for me. For budding business owners, or people that want to look at the entrepreneurial way of doing things, 4 Disciplines of Execution is the name of a book that teaches you how to scorecard and scoreboard and somewhat run business like a game where everybody else can win from it. That's a really important one. And then Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way, which is a series of vignettes over 5,000 years of people and famous leaders and what it took for them to get to where they went. But I'd say those are 3 or 4 that right off the top of my head make a lot of sense.
Great recommendations, man. Yeah. All right, that wraps up our show. Jed, I really appreciate you coming on, telling us your, frankly, just truly amazing story to date, right? You got a lot more to go. I'm excited to see you grow. I'm excited to see you achieve your goals in business and personal. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, I appreciate your awareness with veterans. It's such a healthy group of people to take care of.
Absolutely. Yeah. Quick shout out to our subscribers. Thank you for subscribing to our channels. To our listeners, a reminder to please subscribe. Shout out to our sponsor, Jet.Build. We'll see you all soon. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.